I moved here when I was 14, so I would have started ninth grade here, I guess. Ninth grade, yeah. So I actually only went to high school here. Uh, I grew up in Detroit, and my parents were from here, and they retired, and so I moved here. One of the greatest things that ever happened, because I love the southern way of life, and I love this area, and I was exposed to a whole different lifestyle that I would have never been exposed to up north. The church doesn't play nearly as big a role in the community up there as it does here, and so I became a Christian here. Got exposed to a lot of great kind of music that I would have never heard, country and gospel and Delta blues. So it was just one of the best things that could have ever happened to me coming down here. Helen Mercer was a trip, and for some reason she loved me. I was mischievous, and she just loved me. And I never had Miss Ball, but Miss Ball and I were big buddies. We'd hang out in the hallway and talk. I was actually never in her class. Miss Robinette, Miss Timmerman, probably more than anybody, Miss Timmerman. I was in FBLA, and when I was in high school, I don't know if Jonesboro still is a dry county, but there was no really bars around here that I could play music in, and so I would have to drive to Blytheville to play in some of the clubs over there, and so during the week nights I would play like from 9 to 1. I'd get in about 2:30 in the morning, and I'd have business office education my first two periods, and she'd say, "Jim, you look tired. Just go lay on the couch back there." And so she would let me sleep on the couch. I don't know how I had them all roped in, but I did. But Miss Timmerman was awesome, and she would let me sleep in and then catch up on my work.
She knew you'd been out gigging.
She knew I'd been out gigging. Yeah. I think maybe she saw potential there. A great teacher will recognize that every kid is different, and they have, and you need to nurture their strengths, and she did that. I probably learned as much as anything from playing sports, because being on a record is very much teamwork, or producing a record. You never do anything by yourself, and so as a session musician, I'm called to play on different artists' records, like you mentioned, Reba or Dolly or Brad Paisley or whatever. And it's never about me. It's always about being part of the team, and all of our goal is to make that artist be the best they can be. And so I probably learned as much of anything I've learned from playing basketball or being on a team. We all have a role, and we're all there to support the team. It's not about us. I used to work at Riceland. I almost lost my arm is what happened. So after high school, I got married right after high school, and I used to load boxcars, and the process is these bags of rice, they would fill them, these bags of rice, and sew them, and they'd come down a conveyor belt, and you'd pull an individual conveyor belt into the boxcar, and at the end of the conveyor belt it was tilted up, and it would shoot these bags of rice off there, and you'd catch them and stack them, and they weighed like 80 to 100 pounds, and two guys would load 1,200 bags in a boxcar in about an hour. And so one day this bag was coming down the conveyor belt, and it was on there sideways, and I had a long sleeve shirt on, and I pushed that bag to straighten it up, and my sleeve got caught on the pulley, and right as my shoulder got to the pulley, I just pulled back as hard as I could, and the stitching around my shoulder, the sleeve ripped off, and it was going round and round, and that pulley, and if it had not let loose, my arm would have been mangled up in there. And so I went and told my mom that, and she said, "You need to, if you're going to go to Nashville, go now. You got no business down there making." I was making $4.60 an hour, and she said, just go to Nashville now." So that's what we did. We packed up and went to Nashville. But yeah, I came very, very close to losing a limb down there. Now, when I first moved to Nashville, my wife Jamie, we dated in high school. We got married right after high school. We moved to Nashville on her 20th birthday, and she got a job as a secretary at Opryland, and I just started going out playing clubs and trying to get my name out there, and So for the first few years, I played clubs. Then I got a job on the Grand Ole Opry with an artist named Jim Ed Brown, who's actually from Arkansas. He passed away a few years ago. And then Whispering Bill Anderson. So I worked with a couple different Grand Ole Opry artists. And then Marie Osmond, toured with her. That was my first big artist. And you guys may not even know who Marie Osmond is, but in the 70s, she had one of the most popular TV shows. Her and her brother, the Donnie Marie Show. And then Dan Seals. He was the last road gig I had before I jumped into doing records full time. So I worked with him. I left him in 1994. You guys don't know who Dan Seals was, but at the time, he probably had like 15 #1 records. He was a big deal in the 80s and early 90s. And I left him in 94 and just made the commitment to just do sessions. And but man, he was a great man. He passed away. Gosh, it's been about 10 years ago now. He had cancer. He was 64.
Yeah.
He was a good man.
Yeah.
And I got off the road in 94, and really just for the last 25 years, that's what I've been doing, is playing on records and producing records and writing songs and stuff. As a session player, for the past 25 years, that's pretty much what I've done, is play on records. And this record producer, Buddy Cannon, was producing Willie's records, and I had worked for Buddy on other projects, and he thought he was putting together a band to fly down to Austin to work with Willie. And Willie's a little bit standoffish about Nashville session guys. He likes musicians that are a little bit more raw and rough around the edges. If you ever listen to Willie Nelson records, they don't sound slick and polished like what's coming out of Nashville. So when we first got there, we were going to record for 4 days, and we were going to start at 10 a.m. And at 10 a.m. we were all there, and Willie wasn't there. And then 11 a.m. Willie wasn't there. And Buddy was thinking, oh gosh, I flew all these guys in. I got to pay them for 4 days' work, and Willie's not even going to come in. And Willie showed up about noon. And he walked through slowly, and he went in the control room, and he listened to what he was hearing, and I guess he thought, that sounds pretty good. So he came in, didn't say a word, just sat down, put his guitar on, and started playing with us. And we ended up cutting 26 songs over the next 3.5 days, and it was unbelievable. So it's not this way so much anymore, but back about 20 years ago, there was a really big songwriting community in Nashville. In the year 2000, there were probably about 2,500 people that had songwriters who had publishing deals, and they would be paid in advance to come in and write so many songs per year. And so when we'd write these songs, we had a staff of people who would line up meetings, and I would just write them and turn them in, and they would get them cut, And now it's not, because of the way our industry has shrunk, and streaming and illegal downloading, all that has affected our industry. There's only about 150 writers on staff now, and the publishing industry has really shrunk. And but anyway, I wrote this song. I had a writing appointment with another writer, and we just met in a cubicle in Warner Brothers, and we toss out ideas and say, hey, you got anything you want to write? And he had this title, thank goodness. And so we wrote it in about an hour and a half, and had no idea what was going to happen after that. So I really had given up playing live at all until Bob Seger called. I don't know if you know who Bob Seger is, but in the 70s, he's like an iconic rock artist. In the 70s, he was, when I was your age, that's who I listened to, was his music. And so one night the phone rang, and he said, "Is this Moose?" And I said, "Yeah." And he said, "This is Bob Seger." And I went, because I wasn't expecting the call. And he was thinking about doing the first tour that he'd done in 10 years, and I had been recommended. And I flew up to Detroit and kind of sat in with him, and he said, "Why don't you come out on tour with us?" So I've been with him ever since. We did 74 shows this past year, and we were playing like all the Coliseums, like we played FedEx Forum, and those were the type of venues we were playing. So yeah, it's pretty neat to hear, although it be people my age, older people, screaming and singing all the words to every song. It's pretty neat, neat. I never really looked at it as hard work, but looking back on it, it's just I was doing what I loved. And so I was always pushing myself to learn something, and I still do. When you get to the point where you feel like you know it all, you're kind of done, you know. So I try to grow all the time. I surround myself with younger writers and younger musicians, and collaborate. And yeah, so a lot of hard work, a lot of studying, and the hard work part was probably looking back on it. Like I said, it doesn't feel like hard work. It was a lot of long hours, and I was just doing whatever I had to do to get by at the time. But looking back, it was a lot of hours, and a lot of hard work, and a lot of playing late nights and not being there for certain family things, and a lot of sacrifice in that way, you know. Well, definitely you have to get to where everything's happening. I run into, because I wear a few different hats in the music industry. I've been a songwriter, I've been a studio musician, I've been a road musician, I've been a record producer, and the only way that you're ever going to, well, first of all, let me back up. You have to define what it is you want to do in music. If you just want to write songs and play around here, and that brings you much joy, there's absolutely nothing wrong with that. I wanted to play on records, and so for me, the only way that I could get in the middle of that was get to where those records were being cut, because the greatest talent in the world to me is in Nashville, and so why would Nashville look outside of Nashville to hire a musician? You know, so you got to get in the mix. And when I first got there, I thought just getting in the mix would be enough. I thought I had the ability and the talent, but I didn't realize until I got there how much I had to learn. So you need to surround yourself with people who are a whole lot better than you, and who are actually doing what you're doing, and learn from them, and learn to not talk but to listen, you know, and observe and soak everything up like a sponge. So you have to get in the middle of it. So you have to just get there, you know, and be ready. It took me 14 years from the time I moved to Nashville to the time I played on my first record, which was always my goal. So a lot of people might have left, and I didn't leave, you know. If you do that, you really don't ever work a day in your life. You're getting to do what you love, and if you get paid for it, it's like, well, thank you. I'm getting paid to do what I love, because I see a lot of, I've seen wealthy people who aren't necessarily doing what they love, but they've been able to make, and they're some of the most miserable people I've ever met. You know, so it's not really about making money or even the success. It's really about finding what you love doing and find a way to do that. And if you ever don't ever make $1 million, it'll be okay, you know, because life is about being happy. It's not about making money or all that other stuff. It'll happen if it's supposed to. But doing what God put you on this earth to do is the main thing.